welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history and social history in particular, and also making things historical and otherwise. And we normally start by talking about what we've been up to. So, what have you been making or baking?
Um, so I've been digging a lot of the time since we last recorded. So I haven't done an awful lot. Um, yeah, because I volunteer with this kids archaeology club,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been digging up in rural Lancashire. So I've been very tired and
That's
very not in
amazing.
the house.
In that case, we can replace this section with what have you dug up recently?
Um, we've had some cool stuff. Like it's a Roman vicus, so we got some bits of hypocaust and stuff,
Ooh,
but also some medieval pottery and the head of a Victorian doll.
creepy, but I like it.
Yeah. I did start one project. I've started making the Knives Out jumper for Nick.
I have not seen that movie, but I am aware of the jumper because you sent me a picture and it's cable heaven.
Yeah. Unless you're making it, in which case it's cable hell. It has 13 cabled sections, using 3 different cable charts, which are all different numbers of rows.
Wow. Okay.
Um, but I'm gradually working my way through. I'm like I've just started. I'm just on the back at the moment, but I'm getting there, learning the pattern, and it's brick red, which is gonna look really nice on Nick.
Awesome. I'm excited to see the jumper be birthed.
Oh, I posted a not quite floss tube on YouTube.
Oh,
I
yes.
did a craft diary. I am Invisible Goats. Go watch it if you want to see the things that I talk about making. Now we both do videos about our crafts.
Yeah.
I will link both our YouTubes in the episode description.
So, I mention seed cake last time? I can't remember.
I think you did, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I can't carry on the back of that for much longer then. Um, haven't really done much baking actually recently. I need to get back into that. But I have been working on a project to make myself a knitted vest with hand spun yarn. So
Oh,
I finished spinning the yarn yesterday, and it's like the finest I've ever done. It's a 3-ply sock weight, so that's spinning 3 very thin threads and then spinning them all together to make a 3-ply. Um, yeah, so that was really cool. And then I dyed it with hibiscus flowers, which turned out amazing. And I'll pop a picture on the Twitter. Yeah, and it's a really lovely kind of mauve color.
oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so that's currently just drying, and then hopefully I can start knitting soon, which is exciting. And it was a lot of fun because the hibiscus dye bath is like blood red, so it looked like I was definitely murdering someone in my kitchen. But now I
Yeah,
have lovely
pictures on
mauve
your
purple yarn.
Instagram did look slightly like you were cleaning up a crime scene.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in that whole process start to finish, I'm documenting it on my Instagram stories, so you can check that out. Yeah.
I will
So,
also put a link to Hazel's Instagram in the episode description.
so my topic for this episode is rose hips.
Oh, yummy.
And I picked that because I am gearing up to make some rosehip syrup. We've got a really big bush in our garden which has a lot of rosehips. So I'm just kind of hovering around them, trying to figure out whether or not they're ready yet. But I haven't really done this before. I tried to do it last year and it didn't work. So this year is going to hopefully be it. Now, why would I want to make anything out of rosehips? You might ask. Some of you maybe, I don't know. They are extremely high in vitamin C. Like, they have more vitamin C than oranges, which is quite amazing, really.
Is that by weight or
Yes,
nice?
yeah. Um, and in fact, they're so high in vitamin C that they've been used as a winter source of vitamins for thousands of years, and particularly in World War II, when there was a lack of fresh fruits and stuff, they were used for health purposes. But I will get to that later. So, for anyone that is not that familiar with um, like forage and wild foods and stuff, the rosehip is the fruit of the rose bush. So, like, even if you weren't aware what they were, you've probably seen them. Um, and roses are actually related to apples. So yeah, they have these fruits.
Okay, so
They're
we're secretly back on apples.
we are everything leads back to apples. I don't make the rules. There are obviously many species of rose across the world, and they all have rose hips, although they will look different. Um, like some cultivated roses have these massive kind of spherical ones, and then most of the wild roses are more kind of rugby ball shaped, sort of oval. But all of them contain vitamin C. The highest concentration is apparently in the wild roses. So the one that um, Liz and I would be most familiar with is the dog rose in Britain, or
Oh,
Rosa
yes, I've
canina.
definitely seen
Canina,
those.
yeah, which can often be found in the hedgerows. Although there are, of course, wild rose varieties all over the world. And there are actually very conflicting stories explanations for why it's called the dog rose. Like, I've heard that it's because it's a wild rose and therefore only fit for dogs, which seems kind of harsh. I've heard that it's because they fruit when Orion and Sirius, the dog star, is overhead in the sky, so in the autumn, winter, in the northern hemisphere. And I've heard it's because the ancient Romans believed that it could cure rabies. So, you know, one of those.
That's interesting because I've also heard of dog daisies,
Mm, yeah. I don't know. It might
and I
be.
c- and I could never find a reason why those are called dog either.
There's actually another one that it might be something to do with the leaves. Like, it's a corruption of dagging, which means like kind of a snipped look, like different, almost like raggedy bits along the leaf. But
Hmm.
yeah, no one actually knows. There's a lot of explanations, but no one answer. Anyway, so in Britain, the dog rose is the one of the most nutritious plants that are still there in winter, and so they've been a part of rural recipes and folk recipes for pretty much ever. Um, yeah, they're as I said, they're higher in vitamin C than other things like sea buckthorn, which also contains a fair bit. Black currants are also quite good for vitamin C. Oranges, of course, but rose hips are more higher than all of them. You can fit so much vitamin C in this bad boy. Um, slaps rosebush. Um,
Don't slap it too hard.
yeah, don't try this at home. It's been used in the traditional medicine of many different cultures, not just in Britain. In Poland, they were made into wine. They can also be eaten, like just as they are, although you have to kind of squeeze out the inside so that you don't get the seeds and the hairs. Um,
Yeah, 'cause the hairs on the inside are really, really fine, and that's why you can make them into itching powder.
yeah, my
Or
mum told me that
or
she
if
used to
you're
do that.
one of the people I went to primary school with, just shove it down the back of someone's shirt and watch them get itchy.
Yeah, I definitely remember doing that as a kid as well. Although I don't think it ever worked that well for me. Like, mum told me that you can use them for itching powder, and then I was like, "Ha ha, I'm gonna do that," and then I must have done it wrong because it didn't produce as annoying an effect as I hoped.
I mean, I was the pranky in this situation, and it definitely worked on me.
Okay, well, testimonial. Um,
Maybe we've just got tougher rose hips up north.
maybe. They're a lot more aggressive. So apparently there's also an Iraqi Kurdish remedy, where they're used as a diuretic and for blood-related disorders. They make an infusion for things like gastric ulcers and digestive complaints in Turkey.
I
Um,
mean, if I was feeling ill, I wouldn't turn down a rose hip infusion, I have to say.
exactly, yeah, they can be used as infusions, teas, jams, syrups, jellies, um, basically anything that will get those good vitamins into you, not just vitamin C. They actually have a lot of other benefits. Historically, the ancient Romans believed it can cure rabies, or literally the bite of a
It's
mad
a
dog.
bold claim.
They may have got this from the ancient Greeks, according to Pliny the Elder, our
You
old
didn't say
friend.
Pliny.
Did I still don't know if it's Pliny or Pliny. Is it
It's
Pliny?
it's Pliny.
Okay, Pliny. According to Pliny the Elder, the brother of Pliny. Um,
I blame Sawbones.
uh, though he writes this story about a Greek woman who had a dream that she needed to send an infusion of rosehip to her son, who was a soldier who'd been bitten by a mad dog and needed curing of rabies, and she did it, and it worked. So there you go. It was also
Ouch.
used in ancient China and Persia. Um, it's basically been used around the world. It was used by lots of different North American indigenous peoples as a winter source of vitamin C, and in traditional medicine as well. So yeah, pretty widespread for something that is so little used now in many places.
So what's the wild range of rose hips? Because that's quite a spread of cultures.
Yeah, so from what I can gather, um, it's all across Asia and Europe, which, similar to the apple, it's fairly easy to spread all across there. But then I also found evidence of, for example, North American indigenous peoples using the rosehip. So it must have been like a pretty established wild plant there as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it seems to be something that can be found in some form or other pretty much all over the world.
At least definitely the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I don't think you mentioned Africa?
no, I wasn't able to find that much information really. But I mean, certainly now, um, roses can be found all over the world. Um, yeah, if anyone does have any more information on like the domestication of the rose and its spread across the globe and wild varieties of rose, I would be very interested to hear.
I mean, that feels like a future episode, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, the rose. Yeah, because we've done the rose hip. Well, we're doing the rose hip, but the rose itself is a whole nother thing. Like there's a lot of symbolism to play with there. A lot of stuff. It's been used for cosmetics, remedies, jewelry, like all sorts of things. So yeah, that's a
Putting it
cool
on the
one.
list.
Whack it on the list. So we know that the rosehip has been used as food and for other purposes for thousands of years because we have archaeological evidence. For example, waterlogged seeds were found in a late Neolithic Swiss lake village site in large enough quantities to suggest that they were being deliberately collected and stockpiled.
Interesting.
Um, they've actually been found at several different Neolithic sites in Europe, um, and it kind of suggests that like people knew that they were good for you, like this was a thing that was worth stockpiling for winter and had benefits.
For listeners who don't know, just 'cause I worry that things like Neolithic are ones that we assume everyone knows. Um,
Oh, sure,
Neolithic is the part of the Stone Age when we had farms, basically.
and houses.
Yeah, the when we were in one place mostly rather than hunter gatherers is Neolithic.
Hmm. So that's what about 10,000 years ago?
I mean, it depends on where, but that I think that's a decent um approximation.
Hmm. Yeah. So they've also been found in medieval latrines, which is a pretty obvious indication that they were eaten. And most famously used in World War II Britain as a substitute for oranges, as I mentioned earlier. So the Ministry of Food organised volunteers during World War II to collect lots of rosehips because they couldn't import oranges into the country. And it was a real worry that people were going to get that nutrition was going to be very poor in the winter.
Yeah, like
So
winter scurvy is a genuine risk in Northern Europe.
yeah, like in the medieval periods, like people would commonly come out of winter with a little touch of scurvy. Um, but yeah, so they organized these volunteers to collect rosehips because there were a lot more hedgerow at the time and a lot more wild roses around. Um, and they issued these recipes on how to make it. Apparently, children got threepence a pound for collecting rosehips, which is pretty good money if you're a kid in the 1940s.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I mean, that'll buy you some sweets.
Except
And
those were rationed.
they issued some pretty exacting directions on how to make it because you apparently have to make it in a certain way so that it doesn't lose the vitamin C.
I mean, that makes
Um,
sense because
yeah.
a lot of cooking vegetables at that point was probably just boiling them to death,
And you
and
do
that
boil
wouldn't
them.
help.
You do boil them, but apparently it's not the boiling that has an impact on the vitamin C, it's the crushing because
Huh.
the vitamin C is contained in sort of within the fruit. And when you crush it, it exposes it to enzymes that will start to destroy it. So, the guidance that the Ministry of Food gives is that you need to crush them and then get them in the boiling water as soon as possible, or like chop them up and then,
So you denature the enzymes quicker.
yeah, so do it into the water if you can, or sometimes the recipes say to just boil them and then like mash them up in the water, so that the water can absorb the vitamin C as the juice comes out. So I did actually track down an article from the British Medical Journal in 1942 where they did an experiment on whether or not rosehip syrup would be like a useful method of keeping people healthy in the winter. Because they actually did put like research into this, and they were able to measure the amount of vitamin C at the time. So the they tested different kinds of things like blackcurrant puree, the rosehip syrup, lemons, limes, oranges, tin tomatoes, orange juice,
I
things
wouldn't
like
have
that.
thought of trying tomatoes, but I guess they
Yeah,
they are that right category, aren't they?
they got some. They haven't got as much as things in your citrus category, but they contain.
Yeah, they're red and acidic, which means they probably have a decent amount.
Yeah. Um, so the winner in all of these things that they tested was a rosehip syrup made by Mrs. Leyland, who was matron of the Islington Institution.
I
And
love that they
very
specify whose rosehip syrup it was.
exactly. So I will post a link in the Twitter to the recipe for Mrs. Leyland's rosehip syrup, which is helpfully given in the article. So it involves 4 pounds of rosehips and 2.5 pounds of sugar. You wash them, put them in the pan, cover them, bring them to the boil. Simmer them for 10 minutes, then mash them with a wooden spoon. You have to strain them twice with a jelly bag, or you can just use like a piece of muslin or some kind of.
What's a jelly bag?
A jelly bag is for straining jellies, so it's like a fine weave bag, and you put your like jelly, like pre-strained jelly in there, and it just strains through. Like it's the weave is um it lets the juice drip through without letting any of the fruit pulp in.
So how far off am I if I just imagine a giant tea bag? Because that's what that's making me think.
I guess. Yeah. A lot of the time they would be left to hang for a few hours and just like everything drips through. So, I mean, you can also just use like a piece of muslin, or you can use cheesecloth in the case of like more like larger things that you don't need the small holes for.
Mhm.
Um so yeah, you have to strain it twice so that you get those very fine hairs out, because you don't want to be drinking one of those
No.
accidentally.
Don't drink the itching powder.
No. No, 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 no. Yeah. And then you would like add the sugar and bring it back to the boil, simmer it until it reduces down a bit, and then you got your syrup. You bottle it, and it keeps for a few months actually, so it will keep through the winter.
Nice.
And actually, syrup has quite a lot of uses. Like you can put it in drinks, you can put it on your porridge, um, you can use it for all sorts of things, really. So you
Yeah,
could even put some
I
in your
did come
coffee.
across I think it was lamb with rosehip syrup as
Ooh,
a Middle Eastern dish.
okay.
I can't remember where I came across it, but it was gorgeous.
Wow, sounds pretty good. I mean, yeah, rosehip syrup is meant to be pretty tasty, um, and like rosehips in general. So yeah, and apparently it's the wild ones that are tastier. So if you can get to a dog rose or your local variety of wild rose, would recommend that one. So yeah, that's a pretty short history of the use of rose hips. It kind of seems like throughout history they've been one of these things that people worked out was good for you, but not necessarily why it was good for you. And so I think that's why we have it used for. It's one of those things that people know is good, but ends up getting used for a lot of different complaints, because it will probably have like a general effect of like being healthy for you.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that's why it's found we have all of these folk remedies and recipes involving rosehip.
Yeah, it does seem to be kind of a thing whenever people discover something is good for one medical problem, they just go, "Ah, well, clearly this will cure everything. This is the one thing we've been missing."
I mean, yeah, we still do that.
Ivermectin.
Oh, is that the thing? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's do local larder before we get political.
Hello, I'm Mod Pencil from Probably Bad RPG Ideas. If you'd like to hear discussions of ideas such as what if in my urban fantasy game magic turns out to not be real, and what is the best rules for an ogre, then listen to the Probably Bad podcast, which is available on everywhere podcasts are and also YouTube. Or check out our Tumblr and Twitter.
Yeah. Um, so this one, I'll admit it's another one that isn't particularly local, but 'tis the season. Um, and I was curious how long this has been a thing because it's ubiquitous now. So I have been reading about pumpkin spice lattes.
Excellent. It is indeed the season, and I don't care if it makes me basic.
Well,
Everyone loves pumpkin spice.
apparently pumpkin spice lattes or PSLs, as they are apparently now known, like it's a thing to just abbreviate it to PSL. Have been around since 2003, which I did not realize.
Oh, okay. I always think of it as a sort of part of the hipster 2010 era, but I
Yeah,
guess
like they,
not.
because it was the thing, the era when people criticized teenage girls for liking things.
Hmm.
Pumpkin spice lattes were high on that list.
Pumpkin spice has got to be a lot older though, like as a concept.
It definitely is. I actually found, yeah, so the term mixed spice,
Mhm.
referring to what in Britain is called pudding spice, or in the US is pumpkin spice. So the term mixed spice goes back at least as far as 1828. Um,
Ooh,
the term pumpkin spice specifically goes back as far as, sorry, the specific blend being used for pumpkins goes back as far as 1796. It
I did not expect that.
shows up in Amelia Simmons' American Cookery, the first cookbook published in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a recipe for pumpkin pie, spelled Pompkin.
Aw. I don't know why, but that
Um,
makes it sound cuter.
it sounds like a little baby pumpkin.
A pumpkin.
So it's a very basic recipe because it's 18th century. Step one: 1 quart stewed and strained, 3 pints cream, 9 beaten eggs, sugar, mace, nutmeg, and ginger, laid into paste, number 7 or 3, with a dough spur, cross and checker it, and baked in dishes 3/4 of an hour. Number 2, 1 quart pint of milk, 1 pint pumpkin, 4 eggs, molasses, allspice ginger in a crust, bake 1 hour. Like, it's not
Okay.
what we would now call a helpful recipe, but that's definitely a pumpkin pie with a recognizable pumpkin spice to it.
Yeah, that sounds like what I imagine a pumpkin pie would be. I don't think I've ever actually eaten like a pumpkin pie.
Well, it's hard to get actual eating pumpkins in the UK rather than carving pumpkins.
Yeah,
Although
and also
it's getting easier. I'm gonna try and make a pumpkin pie this year, I think.
I'd like to try like a proper one. Like, I mean, I've had plenty of like pumpkin soup, savory pumpkin, but
Mm.
I've never eaten sweet pumpkin, and I'm interested.
There's a Betty Crocker um DIY pumpkin spice, which is 18 parts cinnamon, 4 parts nutmeg, 4 parts ginger, 3 parts cloves, and 3 parts allspice. Which is a
Big
very
as this
cinnamon heavy
pumpkin.
one.
Yeah. That's a lot of. I don't think I want my pumpkin to be doing the cinnamon challenge.
But I mean, obviously now you can buy pumpkin spice blends at various big US chains, and you can buy pudding spice, which, as I say, is basically the UK name for the same thing,
Mhm.
in a lot of supermarkets.
I feel like the traditional like winter spice blend is pretty much just cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and nutmeg, right?
Yeah, sometimes allspice and cardamom get in there as well.
Hmm.
Um, because there's a Dutch spice mix which has cardamom in, which
Ooh.
is used for Sinterklaas, which
Mhm.
is a sort of Saint Nicholas celebration in December, called if my Dutch friend is listening, please don't hate me. I'm doing my best. Uh, Hokruden or Speculaaskruden.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, which is basically cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, cardamom. Um, but the actual spice latte itself, which originally it was just part of a group of limited edition sort of Christmas drinks, including like a peppermint one, eggnog latte, toffee flavors. But this pumpkin spice flavor was right at the top when they were doing the focus groups for Christmassy flavors. Um, and it was so popular that they actually had to step up production of the flavoring to keep up with demand. And
Wow.
this is in 2003 when it was just being tested in Vancouver and Washington DC and nowhere else. Naturally, after that, the next year they just rolled it out
Yeah.
just everywhere.
That's interesting because I honestly don't see it being associated with specifically Christmas that much. It's more of
No,
a like
nowadays it's just
autumnal.
autumn. Yeah, this year they brought it out in at the end of August.
Hmm.
Like the pumpkin spice latte has been out for about 2 weeks as of recording this episode this year.
But I don't know why this is affecting me so much. Like I don't even drink coffee. I've
Yeah,
never
I don't
drunk a
either,
pumpkin
but I
spice
love
latte.
pudding spice.
I would smell one, definitely.
I
But
like when Nick gets one and I just sort of sit and smell it.
do they do other things? Like do they do a pumpkin spice hot chocolate? Because I would drink that.
I'm gonna actually check that. Check the Starbucks full menu.
Like that is one of the only things that would induce me to spend money on a large drink.
I mean, I've made pumpkin spice hot chocolate myself and it's very good.
Mm,
I can only see it pop up in a secret menu website, and those are dodgy at best.
oh,
Um,
alas.
but in 2015, when they changed the recipe to actually include pumpkin,
What?
yeah, I was surprised as well.
I
Uh,
suppose when you think about it, the pumpkin spice is just the spice for the pumpkin. It doesn't contain the pumpkin. So I guess I wouldn't necessarily expect there to be pumpkin in the drink.
Yeah, apparently they experimented with different ratios of pumpkin to spice and ended up deciding not to bother putting pumpkin in. And then in 2015 they decided to after all.
Okay. Was it
Um,
controversial?
it is controversial, but for a really silly reason, which I will get
Okay.
into. But apparently you can order because it's this flavors in a syrup, so you can order other drinks with that syrup in apparently.
Ah.
Um, I mean, personally, I do not go to Starbucks because they don't make very good drinks as a general rule, but I'm sure other places also do pumpkin spice.
Also, like, I don't think it would be too hard to make your own pumpkin spice syrup. Like, all you gotta do is simmer some spices and add sugar and reduce
There
it.
there are many recipes online for making your own pumpkin spice sauce with or
Yeah,
without pumpkin in.
bootleg pumpkin
Um,
spice.
but yeah, the so I don't know if you're aware of Food Babe.
I'm not. Describe
Um,
food baby, please.
so Food Babe, otherwise known as Vani Hari, um, is a very pseudoscientific food blogger
Oh,
who likes to complain about food ingredients.
okay.
Um, so she complained about the caramel coloring that they used,
Mm-hmm.
because it contains low levels of a substance which can be a potential carcinogen, but is classified as food safe. And it's worth mentioning at this point that most things are classified as a potential carcinogen.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yes, she also kicked up a fuss about there not actually being pumpkin in it.
Okay.
With other people pointing out that yeah, it's pumpkin spice, it's not pumpkin flavor, but
Hmm.
they ended up putting pumpkin in it anyway.
Okay.
And also removed the artificial coloring. So I think pseudoscience might have won that one.
Okay. Huh.
Apparently, it didn't really affect the taste.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know how you make coffee taste of pumpkin.
I mean, it sounds like you kind of don't. You just put
Yeah.
pumpkin in there to quiet
You add
to
the
quiet
idea of
certain
pumpkin.
people.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, um, that is that is pumpkin spice latte. And I think this episode is going to be slightly short, but there wasn't a lot to say about pumpkin spice latte. I just felt obligated to talk about it, you know?
Well, yeah, I think this is actually our sort of standard episode length. It's just that recently we've got a bit full of ourselves. And we're making that your problem, listeners.
Yeah. I mean, you're still listening.
More for you. But thank you.
Yeah, also thank you.
We do appreciate it.
Especially thank you because we recently got our first £5 level patron, which is very exciting. That means someone's actually reading my recipes.
Oh, yeah.
Um so yeah, we are on Patreon. As Bread and Thread, if you want to support us, get access to a Discord and monthly recipes written by me.
We are also on Twitter at Bread and Thread. You can email us on breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com if you have any ideas for future episodes or you want to tell us about Wild Rosehip coverage
We're
or
also
anything else.
we're also on Tumblr at Bread and Thread and on YouTube, putting up old episodes weekly. You guessed it. We're also Bread and Thread on YouTube.
Makes it easy.
The branding is important. Um, yeah, we're occasionally putting other videos up there. I think the only other one at the moment is me making tallow soap, but others will be forthcoming, I'm sure.
I'm gonna do some dye vlogs and stuff once I've got access to a better camera.
That would be very cool.
Yeah.
So, thank you for listening, and yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Talk about jeans.
gonna be a Jodcast.
Jodcast.